Muchas gracias por su asistencia.
Good afternoon. I'm Pérez Tupiñá. I have a program, a TV show in the Spanish TV, and I have the honor to welcome you all and to moderate in this challenge, this XL challenge, which deals with digital life in the era of people. We all know, we are all aware that the digital world is transforming a great part of our lives, work, information, even our cognitive skills and abilities, our personal relations, cities themselves, and we see it sometimes, or we look at it sometimes with some uncertainty and respect. Of course, we are optimistic and we look at the bright side of things in some areas, for example, in medicine, in entertainment, and improvements that technology offer. But we are very cautious sometimes, and it is also good to be cautious sometimes because we have that uncertainty. Where are we heading towards? What role are people going to play in this future? And it is good that we reflect and meditate on possible scenarios and how we can make those scenarios be the best possible ones, and to have people at the core, at the center of everything. And this is the forum to reflect on that, and we have excellent speakers that I will introduce in a while. I'll just give you two practical ideas. The first speaker is going to speak in English, and there's an app which I hope the attendees will have in mind, which is All You Say, and you will have simultaneous interpreting there. And this event is being broadcast in streaming through our webpage and the Telefónica Foundation of FundaciónTelefónica.com. I guess that people that are watching us already know that, but it is good for you to know for some other occasions. But there is a hashtag, XLDesafío. I don't know, perhaps it's on the screen. Well, you have seen it, XLDesafío Vía Digital. And this event is organized by the XL Semanal, and also together with Telefónica Foundation and the Human Age Institute. Before we go on to introduce the speakers, there will be a few words, welcoming words on the part of the organizers. Luis Miguel Livas is in charge of employability in Telefónica Foundation. You have the floor. Thank you, Pere. I will be brief because I know that this is the less relevant part of this event. Welcome you all to Telefónica Foundation, to our home. We organize and we host lots of events here in this forum where we try to convey and inspire and motivate. For us, it is a pleasure to continue with this XLDesafío, this challenge. In the first edition, we joined the challenge with education, then with employability, and now we are dealing with a look into the digital future. It is clear, and I will give you no new ideas because Pere has already mentioned, but we are at a time, at a moment where many things are happening. There's a whole digital transformation going on, and they say that 8 out of 10 years that I are in primary school will work in something that does not exist right now, that they are going to replace 57% of the jobs that we have right now with technology. But there are also opportunities. New jobs are being created. This forces us to reinvent ourselves, to see technology as an opportunity for change, and mainly focusing on people, putting people at the core of everything. Ethics and values have to play an important role, and we thank very much our colleagues, Human Age Institute from the Manpower Group and also the Vocento Group, because together we have decided to put this, to make this space available for you so that we can enjoy it and use it and make the most of it. And I would like to finish with a message, which is that it is clear that technology enables, but people transform. Thank you. A very nice message. Now, Loles Salas, in charge of Human Age Institute and Talent in Manpower.
Que en 5 minutos hayamos dicho 2 veces poner a las personas en el centro. El mundo va de poner al talento en el centro para llegar a ser sostenibles en la industria, ¿no? Como nos gusta decir a nosotros. Bueno, gracias, bienvenidos a este precioso espacio. Es un placer para nosotros estar de nuevo una vez más en esta tercera.
Wonderful to be here with you tonight on the third edition with Fundación Telefónica and Grupo Vocento. We started with you 2 years ago with the hope of searching in the educational field to discover new learning paths. Last year we discovered the challenges for employability and the development of talent, and this third cycle starting today has the challenge of digital life. Who has not heard or lived the digital transformation? Digital transformation is here to stay, and it's a great opportunity, as Luis Miguel was saying. It's a great opportunity. Technology will affect all positions today and in the future, and we need to study all the challenges that technology brings us. Manpower Group has the opportunity of being in Davos in every event, and I would like to share with you the study that we have shared with them today. We have called it Humans Wanted, Robots Need You. 68% of companies nowadays consider that the employees that they have will be the same number or even more in the future within the process of transformation. Those companies that have started the digital transformation, 24% of them are already hiring new people for the new positions in the future. So the Davos debate is not about robots taking the jobs from us. The conversation is about how we can get the best of ourselves and how we can co-create and find the best solutions for an employment field that is changing. And I think this is an important message from Manpower Group. We have launched 5 trends that we think affect all the cycles of talents in each organization. One of them we've called it skills revolution, the revolution of the competences. We do not have any executive who is not talking about the need of changing our skills and capacities to be sustainable in the future of the employment, such as curiosity for learning, the capacity for learning, for dealing with complex problems. And these are things that we need to develop for the future, for something that is very important, which is to have a cultural transformation together with the digital transformation. If we do not place the talent really as the driver of this transformation, if you also add to this that 1 out of 4 executives has difficulties in finding the talents that they need, and 45% at a global level find the same difficulty, really the challenge is really at hand. We have 2 main challenges to face. I want to remind you of the challenges that we presented in Davos 2 years ago. One is that leadership needs to be conscious, aware, and responsible, acknowledgeable. I know that we are all aware of the challenge that it presents to us, and I ask you for you to be acknowledgeable and responsible for this. We need to ensure that we're creating organizations that are learning at the pace that the world is changing and growing, or even faster. And for this, it's key to promote what we called the learnability, which is the ability and curiosity of learning in an environment that changes ever faster. A second challenge that we have to face and leaders need to devote time to deal with, we need to teach our teams to learn with them so that they can really gather and increase and strengthen those skills towards the future. And a third challenge that I find key is to lead by the example. We cannot do this if we do not lead by example. And this means that we need to be humble. We need to be humble leaders who acknowledge that we do not know, that we also have to learn, and that we need to ride the wave of learning so that we can push forward the learning initiatives within our organizations. So I think that today it's a perfect time to start this learning with the experts that we will be having here today, to go back to our institution and organizations and to lead by example afterwards, to being aware, being responsible, and being aware so we can lead towards the future of the employment.
A continuación,
Now, Laura Mújica, General Manager of Taller de Editores.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. I will just steal 2 minutes of your time because there are people already waiting to come on the stage. You're probably wondering what XL Semanal is doing here. First, we are Sunday paper, very well known in Spain. We are still printed. We have our printed version. We have about 2 million readers for the paper edition. And one of the things that we thought was important to do, aside opening a digital way of disseminating the knowledge, and aside of this, we thought that one of the best ways to get in touch with the consumers was opening a forum to debate the most important topics in our societies right now. And one of them is this one, the digital transformation. I like talking about digital revolution because it's really spectacular. Not even in the movies that we watched 20 years ago, where we thought that everything was so impressive and that it was impossible for it to happen. We have gone beyond that point, and I think that we will be seeing in the coming 10 or 15 years, and Adik will tell us about this. I think there's a real opportunity to work as a future seer in the digital arena, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your presentation, Eric. And I think that we wanted to be facilitators for the main debates that are occupying society right now. In the digital field, what can we add to this? I think that we need to think about the ethical aspects and the social transformation that is encompassed, or that comes hand in hand with this digital revolution, and that will affect those that will come after us. So we think that there is an underlying debate about this future. So I just thank you all for being here today, and as I promised, it was below 2 minutes.
¿qué tal? ¿Bien?
So, how was it? I am just waiting for the Secretary of State for Universities, Research, Development and Innovation, who is just joining us, will be joining us in a few seconds. I don't know if it will be minutes, but we will have to wait a little bit. That's why I am just making time. We can start reflecting on what we have heard. That we have stuff for debate and for thought. But anyway, we can deal with it later on. But Loles was telling me that we should work about those that are excluded. What do we do with that sector, that segment of population that does not have those learnability skills? Really, I'm not an expert on this, but in my dissemination and brain headhunter job, we have discussed how technology can impact society. And you're always moving in this field, in this and there are always two sides to the coin. It is a huge opportunity in many respects, but for some more than for others. At least that is my impression, and everyone is saying that there are inequalities, that it can generate greater inequalities. But anyway, I don't know what else I can say. I guess that the Secretary of State is coming, but just bear with me for a second. Anyone wants to say something? Loles, you want to say something?
Sí, lo transmito.
I'm afraid we cannot hear what she is saying. Sorry, in the booth we cannot hear if they don't have a microphone.
Sería bueno tener gracias, un micro.
It would be good to have a mic.
Es que
That is one of the questions that many people ask themselves when we talk about the fact that we all have to retrain and reinvent ourselves and recycle ourselves. There will be people who won't have that ability, and those are the excluded ones. What do we do with them?
Creo que
Yes, I think the challenge is for all of us, and one of the main things that I find important is the cooperation between the public and the private sector in order to achieve this global integration. And I always say the same thing. There are two ways of looking at this. Either you really believe in this and it's a passion of yours and it's an opportunity, or do it because it's a strategy. It doesn't matter, just do it. The challenges that we're going to face in the future are going to be ever greater. So if we do not have all the people in our country, we will be finding ourselves in troubles to solve the problems that we will find in the future, and it's a danger for our sustainability as well.
difícil, pues seguro.
It's difficult, obviously, but I think this is why we're all here today, because we want to find solutions together.
What skills, just very briefly, what are the skills that are needed now?
Depends on the different profiles, but the skills that we have seen is learnability, the curiosity for learning. This is absolutely key. Creativity, innovation, and the need to solve problems, complex problems. The adaptability, flexibility, resilience. Without all these soft skills, this is going to be very hard to tackle in the future.
So we have to all retrain ourselves. Welcome, Ángela Eras. It is your turn. I was just making time for you to arrive. You were on the lift. Welcome, and it is an honor for all of us to have you here. And I will introduce her. She is the Secretary of State of Universities, Research, Development and Innovation. She has the floor.
¿Qué hay? Buenas.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I just arrived, and I'm afraid that I will have to leave very quickly to... When I arrived a few seconds ago, I was listening to somebody on the first row here. I don't know who you are. You were talking about the skills, the profiles that will be needed in the future, and I could not agree more. It's true that all these skills that I was hearing are necessary in order to work in the digital era. And these are also very necessary for the scientific field and the innovative field. We need skills such as curiosity. Also, we need brave people and people who have many other skills that are connected to the scientific world and the technological world as well. And in the matter at hand here today, the digital era that we are living through now, we need to be aware that this has just started. This will move forward very fast at a speed that we might not even be able to imagine, although we are realizing it every day. As they said, I am the Secretary of State for the University, Science and Innovation and Development. It's a single package, and it's very complex with a lot of competences, and there's a lot of work to be done in all these fields and a lot of policies that need to be pushed forward. And the current moment is already complex. But we need to push these policies looking towards the future, because the options are we either move for a country that is based on knowledge, and a knowledge that is transformed into an added value for the whole of the society, or if we do not do this, I cannot imagine any other alternative. And we do not want to imagine any other alternative, because the future needs to come from the developments in the knowledge, from the advances in the knowledge, especially applied to innovation and in the value that it can provide society. Within that knowledge, what we used to call the new technologies, the information technologies, ITCs, ICTs. And what we're dealing with today are going to be very important. They're already quite important, but they will become even more important. And the best jobs, we already know this, will be those related to these technologies. This means that if we want to have a country based on knowledge, and whatever comes after this knowledge or is developed through this knowledge is making us trying to keep all the talents in our country. We do not want to lose any brains with such skills or the abilities to develop such skills. And I'm talking about a system of scholarships that promotes keeping these talents inside. And I'm also talking about not losing any talents due to a gender issue. We have data about women, not only in our country, but also everywhere in the world. And I mean by this, the developed world, we are seeing women, girls who do not want to undertake scientific studies or technology studies, except this is happening everywhere in the developed world, except in China. China is the country that has the biggest number of girls studying these careers, these degrees. These talents are already being put to use in that country. Here, we have a very limited number of girls who are tending to embrace these professions that will be the better paid and that will be holding the leading positions and executive positions in the coming years. So we need to have to do something about this. We cannot move towards that future country that we want to have, a country that is rich in knowledge and innovation and therefore rich for the society as a whole. If we dismiss half of the population, we need to push and policies from the government, and also we need ideas and actions from the whole of the society. We are all responsible for this. As you can see in the title of this conference, we have all these technological tools, but based on knowledge, we need to move these tools forward, but in a human way, or we need to move them forward without leaving the human beings behind in society, as in the sense that it's made of people. There is an ethics to science, obviously. For the first time, we're creating a scientific ethical committee in our ministry, but we also need to have an ethics that needs to be undersigned by all the actors within the field from the private sector, so that we can have some borders, some limits that allow us to be close to the citizens, and also that represent the ethical values that we need to apply to the progress of these technologies. History tells us about other scientific developments where we have had to put some limits in order to move forward in a certain way and avoiding the shortcuts that might lead us to unexplored territories. Also, if we think that we cannot lose any talent in our country and that we need to promote the new jobs, the new studies, if we take into account that we need to train in universities and the further studies. We need to provide education and training that will be useful in the future, in touch with the companies and in the world where the new work field is being developed, although it's not so new anymore. But we need to think what resources we could stress from the public authorities, the governments, how we could reinforce all these actions. In the 8 months that we have been in government, we have implemented several priority areas. One of them is artificial intelligence. Another area is customized medicine. In both these fields, we understand that there are several technologies that are involved, so that we do not miss on the future. In artificial intelligence, we have extremely good teams working on it, and we want to create the synergies that they need so that they can work better, not only the research teams, but also the companies, and in such a way that there's an exchange of knowledge, as we said before, that really flows and that really promotes wealth and richness, which is our main goal. How much time do I have? Okay, so I don't have any more time. So, well, it is a pleasure to be here with you. Let me say that it has been a pleasure to just share this time with you, and I have to leave you because I have another commitment now. But I would like to let you know that from my ministry, we are betting on this future with all the premises that I have said, and also with a project for the general budget for the state for 2019 that really represents a very big step forward for science and innovation. Thank you very much, and keep the good work.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And now we go directly to Eric Dromi. He defines himself as a digital philosopher and a troublemaker. This professional disruptor also, which is a kind way of saying it, a futurologist. He founded Tempus Put Novo, a think tank, and he is an advisor of several laboratories. And he talks about beyond tomorrow when technology meets humankind or humanity.
Before we start, can I ask everyone to stand up for a second? Yeah, I know. No one ever asks you to stand up. Leave your phones for a second and just stand up. And raise your hands. Now you are alone. You are not standing up when everyone... See, I'm going to make a fool of myself. And I wanted to be sure that I have an evidence that you are going to be full with me. To be honest, my daughter is a very introvert person. And believe it or not, I'm terrified of stages. And she came up with this exercise. If you're nervous, ask the audience to do something stupid, take a picture. And that's how it started, and it's been going on for the last 2 years. Every year I follow the Davos conference, and it's fascinating how the leaders of the world are always, they are collected together in order to create a traffic jam in Davos and come up with a list of something that is very, very far away from everyone. And this is the list of threats that they came up with this year. And I was reading this list over and over, and I'm like, crap, they really forgot my toothbrush, because that's for me a much bigger threat than all of the other threats that they just listed. These are very, very far away, but my toothbrush is something I put inside my mouth. It's so much closer to me. And, I'm traveling a lot, and I was just in the US, and I was thinking, maybe I should buy myself an electric toothbrush, because, it's fun, right? It's like something buzzing, and because I'm traveling, I don't want to carry so many more, electrical adapters. So let me find something that I can connect to my computer and charge it with my computer. And I found one from Oral-B. It was only $200, and it was connected right? And in real time, it can map my teeth and tell me if like I missed a spot. So I immediately placed an order, Amazon Prime, waited for the delivery for the next day. But I said, well, I don't want to be like, I don't like to read manuals. Let me watch a video of how to operate this device. So I watched the video, and the instructions was very simple. Make sure that all of your devices are charged. Checked, number one, right? Make sure that your toothbrush is Bluetooth connected to your phone. Check. Install the Oral-B app. Okay. Open your camera and hang your phone in the mirror in the bathroom. What? Make sure that your face is constantly inside the circle of the mirror when you brush your teeth. I'm like, oh, fuck it. I canceled the order and I order a manual toothbrush because that was too much. It was too much friction for a toothbrush. And it brought me back to the thinking, we are striving to connect everything today. But there is a big difference between things on the internet and the Internet of Things. And unfortunately, we live in the world of, just things on the internet. And the difference is massive because it's about pricing and it's about value. And when we have things on the internet, we put the price on the point of production rather on the point of use. But what if prices should be on usability rather than, the point of sale? This is a very old graph, and I really hope that people have seen it. And I'm reusing it over and over again, not to shock you that it took only 35 days for Angry Birds to reach 50 million users. The comparisons, between the telephone and Angry Bird is completely ridiculous because for the telephone, you need to have physical labors to put the telephone lines to reach 50 million people. So the infrastructure was different. But strike me much about the speed that it took for Angry Birds to reach 50 million users. Because there was a representative of the government just standing here a few seconds ago, and I agree and disagree with a lot of things she said. But how do you think the government is capable of understanding what the fuck is Angry Birds in 35 days? Do you think any company can understand the economic impact of any technology that is spreading and hitting 50 million people in 35 days? That's the challenge that we're facing today of this so-called digital transformation. And when we don't understand things, we react with fear, right? Like French, I have a stomach full of complaints about GDPR, but when we don't understand data, we fine Google $57 million in France for violating GDPR. But GDPR is wrong to start with. We don't get to that now. In Arizona, people are actually putting knives in the tires of autonomous driving cars because they're afraid of the technology. And this is what happened, what we don't really like, technology. In the end of the day, I love the elevators in Madrid. It's my first time in Madrid, and it's like every time I step into the elevator, I'm stepping into the pages of history. I love that one. And I'm a huge fan of history, and when I look about when they first introduced elevator, think about it, it was the most sophisticated technological structure that humans interacted with. And it was by law that every elevator needed to have an elevator operator, its profession. By the way, Rio de Janeiro still have 4,000 elevator operators operating in Brazil. And why did we put an elevator operator? Well, because it was a sophisticated piece of technology. Because it has a huge lever that you needed to push. Because you needed to coordinate when the elevator is going to stop between the floors. But the most important, because people were terrified to ride it alone. So we needed to put a human companion inside the elevator to calm people down. And of course, it was a physical space, and when we mature enough, we understood that there is nothing to be afraid of, and we can operate elevators by ourselves. But what about all of these digital spaces that are created around us on daily basis and spreading like fire? This is an exercise that I'm proudly stealing there, the credits over there, since 2015. This is what we do on the internet every 60 seconds, right? And it's amazing to see, that emails, we sent 156 million emails in 2017, and we upgraded, we reached 187 million emails being sent every 60 seconds for 2018. But if you just look at Instagram for a second, 46,000 post images were uploaded last year, or 2 years ago. And we reached 174,000 images being uploaded every 60 seconds. Is there anyone in the audience that doesn't have Snapchat on their phone? Raise your hands. Shame on you. Really, there is wine after that one. Just install Snapchat. How are you talking to your kids if you don't have Snapchat on your phone, right? How do you follow your kids like grades in school if you don't have Snapchat on your phone? But there is a new definition of language that is emerging around us. And how do we capture the economic value of every 60 seconds on the internet? Email didn't really change much. You talked about new talent and what is the new talent we're trying to attract. You think you're going to recruit, Generation Z in 2, 3 years, 4, 6, 7 years, give them a computer and an email address and you will have a talent? Or you need to start adapting yourself to the way, to the way language is evolving with technology, because it's been repurposed over and over and over again. Last week, 2 weeks ago, Netflix had their annual, analyst review when they released their results, and they asked the CEO of Netflix, what is the biggest threat that Netflix is having today? And everyone expecting for them to say Amazon Prime. Well, to be honest, everyone's aiming for the new Disney Marvel venture that is stealing all of the superheroes from Netflix. Everyone was surprised that he said Fortnite is the biggest threat for them, because that company did $3 billion in 2018, and they are competing on screen time that is completely different than the screen time that Netflix is actually offering. Do you know when Netflix has the biggest spike in new registered users? When Pornhub went for 4 hours. Pornhub was down for 4 hours a few years ago. Netflix experienced the biggest spike of new registered users. So you ask yourself, who is Pornhub competing with? Well, Netflix, apparently. Pornhub just published their statistics for the US government shutdown, and they have seen massive increase of traffic to the Pornhub during the US government shutdown between the hours of 9 to 10 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't in the evening at all. So there's a fundamentally shift with our threats to our business models, to our economic models, to our economic values. Who is to be most threatened by the fact that Snapchat is introducing a complete new e-commerce platform within their channels? Is it Amazon or is it Telefónica? And these are the questions that CEOs need to start asking themselves. The CEO of Netflix in 2009 said one of the most important questions that the CEO could ever said. We should become HBO before HBO is becoming us. And talking on national level, who should Spain become before they become Spain? And that's the basic questions that I'm asking executives to ask themselves every morning in the mirror, to have teams trying to figure out where is the biggest threat is coming, who is around the corner. And we are busy with these political challenges, especially when you see the clown and the circus in the US. And shit is becoming real. For the first time of ever, we can see streaming shows past traditional shows. We can see new services coming to the cities. And this is not a Photoshop, this is an existing service. In China, actually, there is a Swedish company, not because I'm a huge fan of Swedish companies, but there is a Swedish company that developed autonomous driving trucks that driving between neighborhoods in China that doesn't have supermarket to do a mobile supermarket. And these things are here, and it's not science fiction anymore. Google is releasing new interface on a daily basis if you're following them. We can start use new aspects of our body to communicate with technology. This is the new Intel wheelchair that's using face expressions to control technology. So I can imagine like you're sitting in front of the TV, who are you kissing? No, I'm just changing the channels, right? But that's how face expressions are going to look like. For the first time, we're able to connect human brain, 3 human brains to a computer. God help me if I understand why they connected them to play Tetris. I will do other stuff if I can connect 3 human brains to a computer. But we're able to do that today. For the first time, we can see technologies of machine learning and artificial intelligence, algorithmic intelligence, coming down to AR and VR environment. I love that one because my mom always told me you should never sit too close to the TV. And I told my mom, I didn't get close to the TV just came to me in that sense. But until now, you were not able to sit and watch Avatar for 3 hours in a bulky headset. It's not comfortable. And think about it. It's immersing only 3 of your 14 senses, your ears, your eyes, and the sense of the balance. But we have so much more senses. And we can see technologies coming and compensating on this type of environments. We can see Amazon coming in a completely different way to the delivery environment. And I know you have seen these things before. But when Amazon is coming to this area, they're scaling it like no one is capable of scaling them. And if you think that is interesting, I really love that vision of robots delivering robots to deliver goods. Right? That's where we're headed. 2018, we stopped talking about CRISPR in the basement. CRISPR is the gene editing tool. And we did it in real time. So we do have genetically modified babies out there. And China arrested the guy and they fired him from the university. Great. The CRISPR recipe is available for $100 and you can buy a CRISPR kit for less than that. So if you know what you're doing or you don't know what you're doing, this technology is available for us today. And we're surrounding ourselves at home with various types of voice interfaces, from Google to Siri to Cortana to Alexa. And we're constantly, told my kids that I'm going to Madrid, and 2 of my kids, and I know only one bad word in Spanish, and I'm not going to say it up on, and it's not puta madre. Puta madre I learned after that, I learned the other bad word, right? And of course I'm sitting there and like tell my kids, look what I learned, and we started to argue about the swear that I was saying. No, you don't know that. So of course, hey Google, what does it mean? And I hear like beep, 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 because Google is like apparently not saying, even Google is not capable of saying what we're trying to say. We had a very nice dinner with my kids teaching me how to swear in Spanish because that's the only thing they learn in school apparently. But Friday night, when we sit and debate and when we talk, and we have this rule, I have 4 kids, we always sit and talk about politics and technology, things that are happening in the world. We're always coming to a point of argument. And the point of argument always ends up with, okay, Google, the question, an instant answer. And they are in our bedrooms, in our living rooms, and in our kitchen. And they are constantly collecting data about who we are, what we are doing. Google is experimenting with cough recognition systems right now in the US. So they are able to recognize when family is coughing and build a profile if a flu or influenza is spreading around that neighborhood. And they are selling that information to the FDA. So it's not coming from the government, it's coming from Google in that sense. Amazon is coming to a whole new turf right now, which they're trying to help you reinvent energy consumptions in your home. And it's not Nest, it's more than that. They're going to start buying utility providers. So there will be the underlying infrastructure for energy. Talking about energy, finally we're able to crack down fusion, collecting, harvest, a whole new way to harvest energy. Now it's not in production, but the promises are being set out there. A Japanese guy just married a holographic teenager. And I'm like, I don't know what bothers me more here, that he married a hologram or he married a teenager, right? But think about that question. We're going to get that, and we're going to talk about morality. For the first time, we're able to give back to kids. Prosthetic limb for a child a few years ago costed $50,000. It's less than $5,000 today to 3D print a prosthetic arm for a kid or leg. And the fun part is I follow some of the stories in the US with 3D printed prosthetic limbs. These kids go to normal kindergarten, and the healthy kids, the one that have all of their limbs, go home and tell their mom, I want like that. And it's only $5,000, so here's a nice Christmas present. Merry Christmas. But that's the technology today. This is NVIDIA AI. They ask NVIDIA to imagine humans. This is not Photoshop. This was no human interference. This is an algorithm that is drawing humans. And that's how good the technology today. This is deep fake. When Steve Buscemi is taking the face of the girl from Jennifer Lawrence, right? And also we've seen what deep fake is capable of doing, but it started where they took celebrities' faces and put them inside porn videos. The app is available to download, the code is open, and I can tell you that my friends are doing a hell of a lot of fun with this one. And this is happening in real time. We have AI algorithms that are capable of analyzing your voice and predict if you're going to be depressed or you're depressed today. And if you are in coma or paralyzed or cannot use your vocal cords, you have algorithms that can transfer your brain signals into words, up to 75% accuracy. China is right now deploying one of the biggest experiments with AI, where they're going to use algorithmic intelligence to actually build the surveillance systems on the emotions of the people in China, without invasive surgery, just using sensors. And if you all think that your income is very good and you have a happy job, this 7-year-old kid did $22 million on YouTube last year. He's the most profitable YouTuber from 2018, just by opening toys and playing with them. Welcome to the future. Because I immediately asked my kids to drop school and just open YouTube channels. And I will be the manager, of course, that's obviously. But we are surrounded by so much technology and so many things are happening all the time that there are a bunch of side effects that started to show up. We are living in an extremely technological, obese society. We are talking about smart cities, smartphones, smart home, smart things, digital transformation, the fourth industrial revolution. If I recall correctly, the first industrial revolution is a historical event. I didn't see paper boys running down the street and says, join the first industrial revolution. We wrote about it in the books of history. The fourth industrial didn't happen yet, but we are trying to sell it to companies. And please remember, whenever you put smart before anything, you're talking about technology. So if everyone is trying to build smart things, where are people? If we're building smart cities, who is going to live in these cities? Robots or humans? Because we forget the purpose of the thing if we just start smart. They asked me before, what can you say about digital transformation? I would say, I just want to talk about transformation. Everything is digital. Stop talking about digital, because then you are focusing on the tools and not on the value that the tools can actually bring to you. So you live in a world that everyone in this room knows how to search in Google, but you don't really know what to search for anymore. And you live in a reality where everyone knows how to operate everything, but we have no clue how anything is actually working. Apple, one of the most profitable business units for Apple is Apple Watch. And of course, as a health device, it's an extremely powerful tool. And I spoke to some doctors at Stanford, one was there 3 weeks ago, and surprisingly, there are tons of research that happens that doctors in the US starts to complain that they are spending more time answering phone calls from patients that are worried about the results they're getting in their phones than actually treating real people. People are getting, oh, you have a high pulse, I get a heart attack, I call my doctor. And they're doing it over and over and over again. So is that a good thing or a bad thing for that type of technology? One of the most common injuries for teenagers in California now, when they break their limbs, is falling out of electric scooters. And that is a byproduct of introducing so much electric scooters. This little bird, I just need to break the ice and have some fun. This little bird learned how to say, Alexa, can you order? And apparently this woman had a one-click button, so the bird constantly orders stuff on Alexa, and it was delivered to her home, to the owner home. We are surrounded by screens, and we put screens everywhere. We have screens on the living room wall, we call it a smart TV. We have screens on my arm, I call it a smartwatch. In my pocket, I call it a smartphone. And we're constantly tapping on screen, and we became addicted to the tapping on screens. What do you do when you're standing in a supermarket? Someone before you, someone behind you. You take your phone out and you plug yourself into reality. But like heroin, every you tap on a screen, you click like, you're doing like this to yourself. You're giving yourself a shot of dopamine. And we are becoming addicted to dopamine, but it's a very short-living experience. And we forget how to generate serotonin, which what basically makes us human. And if we live in a society when we are addicted only to dopamine, how are we actually going to talk to each other? How are we going to handle our feelings? That's, by the way, the reason I don't have any Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or any other account. So I know someone complained that I don't have. I just don't have. I don't want to do anything with these things right now. But that's not the scary part. The scary part is that we picked the cell phone penetrations right now. That's the last device that they're actually going to sell. And what is the next platform that scientists are looking at in order to interact with us? Our eyes, our brains. That's where you see most investment today on transforming our eyes into the ultimate screens, transforming our brains into the ultimate processor. So do you want Google here or do you want Google here? Just a question. And I'm going to beat politicians now, apparently. I didn't know there is politics here, otherwise I would have been more politically correct. But it's not technology that, create this mess. It's bad decisions from people that doesn't really understand. I love this Arizona Republican. She thinks she can get the money to build the wall that Trump wants to build by putting a tax on Pornhub. Every time you go to Pornhub, you need to pay $20. Good luck with that. That's how she figure out we can get money to build the wall, by taxing porn on the internet. And I always like to step back and think maybe technology is not about technology. Maybe it's about morality, ethic, trust, education. Maybe these are the fundamental, questions that we need to ask ourselves. Jonathan Haidt wrote one of my favorite books, The Righteous Mind, talking about the difference between conservative and liberal mind. And this is the opening paragraph of the book. A 23-year-old man goes to the supermarket. He picks up and buys a frozen chicken. He takes the frozen chicken home. He unpacks the frozen chicken. He's having sex with the frozen chicken, cooking it and eating it. Now, raise your hand if you feel uncomfortable from that paragraph. Translate that fast, otherwise it's a lot of people that will be very, very uncomfortable, right? How many uncomfortable questions we need to start asking ourselves when we are going into digital spaces, when the interactions are completely not familiar to us? If I stopped in Canada on my way back from the US and went into the sex bordel and had sex with a robot, now did I cheated on my wife? Can she sue me? If someone hacks my AI avatar and kill it, can I claim that that person murdered me? And then we're talking about data integrity, but this is not about data integrity. This is algorithmic interaction. And we are all aware about human and machines. What about when robots decide to kill other robots? This is CES this year, which a Tesla autonomous driving car just decided to run over a robot that was on the road. It's not human, I will just run over it. They did the analysis of the system. It's just completely ignored the robot. So it's a human that runs to pick up the robot, by the way. And everyone is talking about surrounding ourselves with smart home appliances. So I started to look, okay, I have so-called smart TV, and I have a lot of Hue lights at home. It says I need a new fridge. Should I buy a connected fridge? What's the value of connected fridge? And then I realized, I like to go out with my wife and party quite a lot. And when we come home late, we're hungry. What happens if I come to try to open the fridge and the fridge says, no, fuck it, you gain weight, I'm not opening the door? Are you going to accept that? Because these are the questions that this technology are going to enforce us to deal with. And we don't have the infrastructure to handle these questions. In the end of the day, no one argues that machines are good or finding ways to be better than humans. Yes, they are finding very good ways of doing stuff much better than us. So we are fast becoming, everyone's talking about Generation Y, Generation Z. Maybe it's generation useless, right? Maybe we are becoming useless when machines are taking over. In 2013, they discovered the area in our brain responsible for orientation significantly shrunk since GPS became a commercial application, because we don't know how to navigate without a phone anymore today. Even if you know the road by heart, you will put Waze in front of you. But we are outsourcing more and more technologies to more and more cognitive functions to technologies around us. And if we are outsourcing so much to technology around us, we are not capable of making mistakes anymore. And if we are not making mistakes, we are not learning. And if we are not learning, we cannot be creative and curious. And the most two important currencies we have in order to scale ourselves into the future is creativity and curiosity. It's the most two important qualities I'm looking with everyone I'm working with, to be curious and creative. Because if we don't have that, we should not complain that technology took over. Thank you.
Okay, no, time for questions.
Time for questions.
vamos apretadillos de tiempo, pero...
We are short of time, but we want to give you the opportunity if someone has a question, a comment to make.
You don't have it. Okay.
Any questions? Any questions?
Talking about the Google tax, you have any comment? Wait for the mic.
Well, I thought you had a very lucid point when commenting about regulation that is more about focusing on risk than rather harm. So, which is the case of the GDPR, which is more about focusing on what could happen instead of what had happened, which is it's sort of game changer in regulation.
Yeah.
So I'm very much with you in that. But I'm a bit surprised because you're very optimistic, right? You're about empowering people and putting the human in the center.
Today, so that sounds optimistic.
So let me be a bit of devil's advocate here, because what you were saying, the last portion of your talk was rather implying a very human deterministic picture, like humans being seduced by technology, forgetting about their free will, about their own interests. So how do you reconcile those two things, being positive and optimistic and empowered, and at the same time not being technophobic and thinking...
I don't think I will be able to live in myself if I will lose my optimism about human potential of exploring new horizons. I'm with Elon Musk. Like, we need to build human civilizations over at Mars, but we need to do it in our terms, not on the technology terms. I think that we became slaves for technology. Like, I took my kids on a 5-star cruise, and the first questions they're asking is not where we are going to stop. How's the boat? Do we have Wi-Fi? That's the first question. Is that the first questions I would like my kids to ask? To ask where they're experiencing life. I think we became very dependent. We became very, anxious to fulfill our tapping on screens and to make sure we can always tap on screens. And I believe that a new model needs to emerge here. And it's a legislative and it's a business model that needs to emerge here. And this is where I'm pessimistic, that I don't see the political layer actually capable of understanding that. The minister, she was the minister before? State Secretary. She was talking about, like, we put the budget for 2019. I'm sorry. Where is the budget for 2030? Because that's how you need to think, right? Not 2019. So we have all of the tools. We have all of the technology to, I like Yuval Harari saying that, we have all of the solutions for world hunger, poverty, and famine, but we are not unleashing the technology to do that. We are enslaving ourselves to it instead.
Who's deciding? So who's in charge? So we talk constantly about how we like the future to be.
Now you're talking to the anarchist inside of me.
Who's creating this future? Who can decide that the future will be this way? Are the great companies? Are the citizens? Are the regulatory bodies? It's just chance and necessity as evolution?
Number one, I would like the city of Madrid to stop thinking as a non-profit organization and start thinking as a Fortune 500. Then you have a decision power. Because it's cities, it's the cradle of civilization and creativity. This is where we live. And it's, cities should run the partnership with companies like Google, Apple, Facebook, and the rest, and enable their citizen prosperity rather than anything else. But most cities think like, non-profit organizations. Even Pittsburgh, with all of their glory, still think like a non-profit organization. I would like to see the change happening over there. With all the respect to all prime ministers and presidents, they don't give a crap about people that live in the cities. It's the city mayor that is driving in the same traffic as you guys are traveling with. They can have the most power to start enforcing change. But it's like, we talked about education. It's coming to education. Mm-hmm. Sorry, GDPR, it's good intentions, but I said a few times, the road for hell is paved for good intentions. You end up in hell. GDPR started good, but implemented without education. And that's my point of view only, right?
¿Alguna última pregunta o comentario?
Any last questions or any comments? Otherwise, we go on to the second part of our presentation.
Bueno, pues nada.
Well, I am going to introduce a big round of applause for him. Okay. We have to be on time because Mario, I think, has to catch a train. So I will introduce you. And we have Mario Vázquez, who is a researcher of the Barcelona Supercomputing Center and the manager of virtual human development program for medical purposes. So I will then introduce the second speaker, Lorena Jaume Palassi. You will have heard her presentation. She is the founder of the Ethical Tech Society in Berlin. She works with ethical topics, and she is the co-founder of the Dynamic Coalition of Publicness group in Internet Governance program. And if we can put up the presentation, he can start. So I turn the floor over to Mario. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me. For me, it has been a very interesting encounter. Well, I work here in the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, a public institution for research that was founded in 2005. There are around 400 researchers and investigators working there, and what we do since 2005 is applied computational science. Of course, there are lots of churches in Barcelona, but there is a church that is not famous, but that will become well known. It is not very old. It is really not very interesting if you compare to the others, but we have Mare Nostrum inside, which is a very powerful computer. This is just figures, but it is one of the most powerful computers in Europe. It is within the chapel. The chapel is not the best place to put a computer for many different reasons, and many of those reasons can be solved by placing it into this crystal cube, which is the size of a tennis court. And just for you to have an idea of the size of the computer, it has 165,000 cores. This phone, for example, may have 4 or 8. So you can imagine that if it will be at around 40,000 telephones all together, put together, but what is more important, working in a collaborative way. That's what makes these computers peculiar beings. And they have their own personality, so to speak. What we do in our group is simulations. We do simulations, and I didn't realize up until recently, after working for a long time in this, that it has negative connotations, the word, because are you actors? Are you fake? It is recreating nature in a computer, but the question is that the more complex the system is, the bigger the computer will have to be, but the bigger the computer is, the most efficient the simulation has to be. There was an ad, a commercial some time ago that for tires, and it said that the power without grip is no power. So this is the same. If you cannot use it efficiently, it doesn't matter whether you have it or not. We developed a simulation code. We developed ALIA, which is a program for simulation. ALIA, that's what we do. We are recreating nature in a huge computer. We have been doing it for 15 years. It's a lot of work. There are 40 researchers in the BSc that research using that code, and there are 40 more outside. And it is applied science, applied to industrial uses, space, biomedical, and so on. And this is a farm, a wind farm, belongs to Iberdrola. I have to say something. The visualizations that you see here are are really simulations, but they are done with a technique which makes them resemble cartoons to some extent. And this is a wind farm, and what they want to see, to check, is how much energy they can get from this farm with a set of wind conditions. ALIA does exactly that. It recreates nature in a computer, and they look for these 4 words: analyze, understand, predict, and improve. So what is important here is to predict. We want to do something. This simulation, what it does is tries not to repeat what has already been done, but to look at new conditions regarding what is being done. And we are very much application oriented. We need to collaborate, and we work very much focused on apps. What is the physical system? At least in my opinion, the physical system. I'm a physic, but there is something that is really the most motivating topic that really keeps me awake. We will need great computers, a lot of efficient and complete simulations, and a multidisciplinary team. That system is the human body. And that's what I like the most as a physicist. This is a respiratory system where what we do is from medical images, a patient can be any of you. And what we do from medical images, we take the geometry of the patient, of the airways, and what we can do is we can analyze and in the end predict which is the particle deposition in that respiratory system to see where the medicine that you inhale can end up going. And another thing that we do with the same program, always with ALIA, with the program ALIA, for us as a physical system are differential equations. And since all physical systems are ruled by the same set of guidelines, we can do it with the same computer. This is an arrhythmia, and that person has a disease. One of the ventricles is not well activated, and what we do is to use a pacemaker, a very particular pacemaker, which is embedded against the wall of the ventricle, and we do a simulation to see where the pacemaker should be placed in order to recover that function, that heart function. And we work also on other topics. This is a cardiac simulator where we simulate stents, bypasses, and pacemakers and whatever. And so, fine. This is good. We had someone from the government. We can continue, and this would be a message for her. We can continue doing this and publishing and doing science in this way. But in this type of areas, what can I do? For example, my grandmother died of a heart failure. What could have I done in order to help her? That is my motivation. We can continue researching, but there's another way, which is through, and I have to thank someone who came here and really talked about the private system. What we did was to create a spin-off in order to accelerate and attract private investment on what we do as a research. As researchers, which is what we aim to achieve is to cure people. We created a startup. There are two people in the startup. One is me and another one is a friend of mine. But behind those two people, there are 40 researchers and investigators that are developing this program, this app. What we do with LM is what you have just seen. We analyze the human physiology, we try to understand the workings of the organs, and we try to predict in order to improve diagnosis and treatment. And that has an impact on pharma, on medical devices, and also on the clinic part of it. We recreate virtual human beings that are customized or are adapted to the specific conditions of our patients. We create virtual populations so that thanks to that we could perhaps reduce animal testing and testing in human beings. And in that way we would reduce the cost of innovation, because a simulation, even though you need a huge machine and everything, the cost has nothing to do with the cost of animal testing, apart from all the ethical considerations that come with it. And so if we cut down the cost of innovation, we can make innovation reach more people. We were talking about the excluded one, those that are left aside. The idea is what I was saying before, to try new therapies, optimize efficiency, improve the screening in order to detect patients that are candidate to the application of a specific, or the administration of a specific treatment. What we are doing right now is we take a patient, talking about the respiratory system, we draw the geometry of it, we do a simulation, we can suggest a treatment, or we can say, no, he's fine. We can change the inhaler. A pharma company is going to improve the inhaler for a specific patient. Simulations are very costly, very expensive from a computational point of view. They have to be as comprehensive as possible in order to take into account all the factors, and they require a huge machine that is very costly. They have to be predictive. They have problems to be validated. And then there are some regulatory considerations. That's something we can do today. But the idea is not just that. We want to go beyond, and we want to take lots of patients, for example, everyone in this room, and from those patients we can create a whole virtual population of patients, and I can take 10 people and I modify things on the data that I have around them, and I can create 100, 1,000, 1 million. The more patients, the more real patients I have to analyze, the better my population is going to behave. I will be able to stratify, I will look at different populations or subpopulations, and then on that we can put a layer of artificial intelligence that will allow me to do things. It has to be less artificial and smarter, more intelligent. And there are lots of things that are along the lines of artificial intelligence. We want to make it more intelligent than artificial. Really by adding synthetic data to the real data that we have about patients. I'm going to play a 1-minute video. It is in English, so.
Any human, but a virtual version of you, accurate at every scale, from the way your heart beats down to the letters of your DNA code. Virtual hearts already beat within supercomputers, where we can test the effect of different drugs or pacemakers, but also more fundamentally, to understand the way an individual's heart works. Using supercomputer simulations based on scans of your lungs, we can predict with high precision where particles will flow, and then design devices that can deposit drugs exactly where your body needs them. Within a supercomputer, many virtual versions of you can explore small changes in your lifestyle and how they affect your health, aging, and quality of life. Virtual humans, helping you to figure out the very best that you can be.
Bueno, al final esto es lo que queremos hacer y lo que
that's what we want to do, and the science fiction make reality big. People tend to think that this is science fiction, and it is not the case. This is not science fiction. What we want to do and what we are bringing forward step by step, not just us, many other people, is to turn that science fiction into a reality today. That's all. Thank you.
Gracias, Mariano.
Thank you, Mariano. Now Lorena has the floor, and then we will have a small debate.
Recuerdo que Lorena es
Lorena is the founder of the Ethical Tech Society in Berlin.
Gracias por la introducción. También
Thank you for the presentation and also for the invitation. This is my first slide. Before I start explaining what I do and the way my work works, my job works, I would like to explain why I do this job and what is the current status of the debate that we're holding in the field of the new technologies, in particular of the artificial intelligence and ethics. Part of my work is about undoing the myths when we talk about artificial intelligence and new technologies. One of the words that tends to be mentioned is intelligence, in the sense of making decisions in an automatic way, autonomous systems that work by themselves and that do not need any type of human guidance. From the viewpoint of, from the sociological and legal viewpoint and also the ethics viewpoint, this is slightly more complicated. An autonomous system is not an automated system. An autonomous system is something that has an intention behind it. And due to these intentions, it tries to act in such a way that these intentions are realized. And what does it need for this? In all societies where we live, in all cultures in the world, we encounter two factors that are really key to understanding and defining what something autonomous is, that is self-determined. One of them is rationality, and the second one is freedom. A person who reacts within a personal defense situation is not really autonomous. This is why in the criminal and the system we talk about a person who's defending themselves. They cannot be judged in the same way as a person who does it in a calculated way. The other aspect that is important to mention is rationality. We're not talking about the interest of the person, but the procedural rationality. To what extent can I say I love fish, and when I go to a restaurant and they offer me meat and fish and vegetables, instead of saying I want fish, I can say I would like to have vegetables or something different. And sometimes there is a mismatch or an inconsistency between what I claim and what I do. This is why when we talk about artificial intelligence from a philosophical perspective and the formal and logical viewpoint, we're not talking about autonomy, but automation. When we talk about artificial intelligence, we're not talking about intelligence. They do not have an internationality, and they do not have a parameter of freedom. Everything that is within the programs of the artificial intelligence is within a limited framework that has been created by human beings. This is to say that we are in a situation where we encounter a split between the decision taken by a team of human beings and the realization or the execution of this. And this is interesting for our societies because up until now we were looking at the decision factor as something very much connected to the action, so that somebody who decided to act was at the base of it. But this is what's new with the new technologies. We are making decisions in a way that comes before the action, and we do not know in what context or situation that situation will be applied. We understand, we assume that the situations in the future will be similar to that of the past. And with this, we are starting to develop new narratives regarding technology, the way that human beings are dealing and talking about technology nowadays has changed a lot. Until Marcuse and Mandela, we were talking about technology as a way of freeing ourselves, as a tool that allowed human beings to democratize the power if they used it intelligently. Nowadays, we're talking about dystopies, and this is something that is only related to the Western world, and it has a lot to do with the Christian religion. This type of dystopies are not understood in Asia or in other regions where religion or the philosophy that they live with is less focused in the human being, in societies that are not considering the human beings as the center of the world, but the planet as the center world, or in societies that do not understand the human beings to be on the top of a hierarchy that needs to rule over other elements in the system, but that believe that each element has a soul, and that the soul and element is at the same level as the human being. Every theory about the dystopian world has to do with this sense of removal of a sense of being robbed of something, and this is very much connected to the Christian reality. However, reality is much more complex, but less spectacular. One of the things that tend to happen when I talk with government representatives or with people from the civil society, I tend to bring views of things such as algorithms that can be used with cars, for instance. And the feeling of deception is disillusionment is very strong. Disappointment is very strong. What's behind this system, they can translate automatically, they can detect movements and react upon them, but all that there is behind is computing and inductive methods, statistics, if you want, to say it in a very simplistic way. So if we want to deal with these topics and these systems, we also need to consider their ethical gaps. The situation is much more complex than just analyzing the algorithm. We need to deal with the automating process. First of all, there's a team of people who decides that they have a process and that they can normalize, they can standardize things, and therefore we can automate it with some technology. And one of the key points here is to know at when or what part of the process we want to automate. Because if we are automating a process that is not necessarily automated, or that doesn't make any sense to be automated because it cannot be treated with statistic data, because not everything can be turned into data, then we will find the first problem within this system. But then we are dealing with the algorithms, the person who knows about mathematics but who's not the engineer. The engineer is the person who translates the algorithm into the code. The algorithm is a set of rules, and it could be a deck of cards or a software or maybe a board game. And obviously we have the data scientist as well, and after training and learning all this type of technology, we have the people from a different department who need to understand statistics within the framework where they're using it and assess to what extent this makes any sense at all. Nowadays, all these profiles, we do not really understand them. We believe that we have the data scientists. In Germany, we have an expression that is the pig who can lay eggs and give you wool. Nowadays, we think that the data scientist can be able or should be able to do all these things. But what we see here is that there are 6 profiles of different people who need to help developing this procedure. It's not only the people who decide in the team that we want to automate something. We need the mathematician, we need the engineer, we need the data scientist, we need the economist, the neurologist, the fire person, or the farmer who will apply this technology and understand to what extent this makes sense at all. And this is something that we are forgetting. We have the Department of Social Sciences that studies the interaction between the machines and the human beings. There's a very big split between what the scientists are creating and that they understand that it will be implemented, and the functions that are related with the science that they're creating and what people are using it for. For instance, if we think about YouTube or Google search, the search engine from Google, this is a platform where the algorithm wants people to move away from the platform. The longer we stay within the platform, and the worse the service is, because we're not finding what we're looking for. YouTube, on the other hand, is a broadcasting platform, and everything that is programmed there and published there aims at people to stay there as long as possible. Otherwise, they would be not succeeding in their purpose. So what's the situation here? Engineers here in Google, they were always measuring the use of the YouTube platform, considering that YouTube is being used as a TV. And YouTube is not only used as a TV, but also as a search engine. That is to say, the user is doing something different, and the engineers are not measuring this because they do not have sociologists in their team to make them understand what they have to look for. everything that is related to the social use of technology does not depend on the engineer, but on all of us. And what we have learned is that in the postmodern era, everything that we create does not stay as we create them. The fact that other people are interacting with them and make them their own, this entails an evolution. There is a dialogue between the social use of technology and technological innovation. If we do not understand this debate, this dialogue, and if we do not attempt to measure it appropriately, we will create innovation that will not be accepted, or we will create innovation that will distort the way that human beings share, communicate, negotiate, or interact. Another problem that we find in this field is that we see that there's a great confusion between what needs to be done within the technology creation field. There's, on the one hand, we have the law, and then we have the ethics. The law is not necessarily ethical, and the goal of the law is not to make people act more ethically. They just need to regulate the conflict that comes from the use of technology. This is why we didn't use to regulate the number of PS that the technology needed to have, but the speed. Now we're trying to regulate this by law, and this brings up a problem. We do not need to regulate technology per se, but the conflict that might arise from it, ethics are different, and one thing should not replace the other. And actually, do we want engineers taking ethical responsibilities? Ethics are a discipline, and the same as law, and the same as any engineering career. And we are nowadays considering that technical platforms need to have that sort of role and focused within the or center around the engineer's profession. This brings another problem. We expect the engineers to program with ethical base, but ethics are not bound to be programmed. Ethics are based on deduction. What we know as human beings is how to create the context and understand the context to really get ourselves in the shoes of other people, and also emotionally to take the place of other people. And all of these require certain capabilities that we cannot put into any software. In an algorithm, these type of requirements do not fit in order for technology to achieve what we're requesting from it, for it to be ethical. We do not want technology to be ethical. It's for us we need to make ethical decisions and translate this into the appropriate technological process. Right now in our debate, we face great challenges. We're talking about the algorithm's transparency. Isn't transparency a way of moving the responsibility away from the states or the government or the companies to the citizens? In Saudi Arabia, they make censorship transparent. In online platform, you can decide what should be censored in the coming months. So be careful with transparency. Transparency is a substitute when you do not have a good governance. Trust is not based on transparency. Trust implies that we do not need transparency. Transparency is a way of settling down the mistrust, and we have this mistrust when we split the powers in the countries, but the trust in the citizens works differently. What other aspects do we see? The colonization of the data, which is another challenge. All the knowledge that we are creating is based on an inductive process, but science is not only guided by this type of processes. We should not forget that this type of technology cannot move forward if we only focus in the inductive method. We also need other type of approaches and other ways of generating knowledge. Finally, we need to understand that not all knowledge can be put into data. I see we have very little time, so I will try to reach my final point. One of the issues that we are facing in the technological debate is that we are looking at technology as only from the technical capacity it has point of view. But this is a social technical system that only works when it's within a context. So we have a technical dimension, but we also have a social cultural dimension. What human use is being made of it? But at an abstract level, we have the ecosystem, the judicial ecosystem, the environmental ecosystem. This is why the Ethical Tech Society is attempting to assess technology regarding these ethical gaps, what parts we are missing, either the environmental part or the planet aspects, planetarian aspects of it, or the social aspects. Thank you very much.
Well, you have said lots of interesting things. Make ethical decisions and then look for technology to execute those ideas, but not turn technology into ethics. Mariano, I know that you have to leave. Are there any quick questions? There will be mics around. So you have a tool, a very powerful tool, a supercomputer. The Mare Nostrum, which is one of the best in Europe, and you say that your goal is to look for applications for that super powerful tool. My question is, who calls you? Who is interested on using that powerful tool, and with what purpose? We work with Mare Nostrum is included within a supercomputation network in Europe, and a Spanish one as well. There are a European and a Spanish one. And we provide service to scientists, both from Europe, from Spain, and also from other parts of the world that can use it. They can use it with their own programs, or they can go to a higher level and they can say, my programs are not good enough to use this machine, so the service has to be more extensive, and you have to give me access to the machine with the program, or use the program and then I will look at the machine somewhere else. So normally people who come to us are people who want to use the machine, scientists more than anything, and from the point of view of the application, private sector companies that can be small companies or big multinationals to sign contracts with us for research and development. So it is really lots of different areas, but mainly biomedics, aerospace, environment, energy. Those are more or less the areas, the industries that come to us. Okay. And do you have companies coming to you, or institutions whose goal, whose end purpose is not the well-being of people? I was asking Arik, who is in charge? Who is designing our future? So do not leave ethics to the engineers. No, that should not happen. And there are people coming to the BSC. We have projects with security agencies, intelligence agencies, Interpol, for example. And they want to predict. I'm not working in those projects, that's why I do not know how they work, but they want to predict and try to look for data on databases, data that can be associated or linked to criminal actions in some way. But normally, in our case, in my field, what we look for is to recreate nature, so it can be to predict catastrophes or things like that. But of course, we have to say that if you were in a more militarized culture, like for example the US, and you would have defense agencies, weapon manufacturers, and so on. Thank you, Pera, for giving me the floor. I'm an engineer, and I disagree completely with many of the things that you said, but mainly with what you've said, that do not leave ethics to engineers. There's an appropriation of the word ethics. Ethics is one of the biggest words that we have, and speaking about ethics with such a so light-heartedly, I think that it is a source of concern for me. When I heard Carmena, the major, she said that we had to program people when we are young to make the best possible decisions, the ethical decisions, when they grow old, when they come to a point where they have to make decisions. And when you see that ethical program, it has a lot to do with the idiosyncrasy and the values of the bands of Homo sapiens that we have in the different territories. It is not the same, the culture that we have in the US, where the right to life is below the right to property, to private property. They can shoot you if you go into someone else's home because you want to steal something. And in Spain, it is exactly the opposite. So there are ethical questions that are different in countries, and we are getting into a debate that is very peculiar and very special, because the same, for example, in the world of cinema, we have really received many influences. We have Halloween and lots of things that we have received through cinema, and we are receiving the same ethical influences from the people that are programming the technology. Technology is being provided by the US, and they are programming with their own ethics, which is not necessarily the same as ours, how they should behave, what are the considerations that should be taken into account, and they are completely different from ours. And I'm speaking about the world that more or less respects human rights, because we talk about Saudi Arabia or North Korea, but even in the civilized world, the so-called civilized world, where we respect human rights, we have those differences in ethical considerations. And of course, engineers, and I'm the chief data officer of the Telefónica group, we have a say there, because apart from engineers, we are also people that make decisions, and we are taking charge of making that transformation, of the transformation of many companies, and we are creating the technology that people are going to use in one way or another. So we shouldn't be excluded from the ethical decisions, and ethics should be used in a much more respectful way, because it is very difficult to define what is ethical and what is not. That's very complex, and it's too daring to say this is ethical and this is not. Any comments?
Ethics is a discipline such as law. This is not about identifying principles, but also about identifying procedures, processes, and mechanisms and methods to place the engineers in charge of the regulatory task is like placing a lawmaker in the charge of the engineer tasks. They work in their different disciplines and they have their different training. And I do agree with you that we need to cooperate with each other, and that is crucial so that the system that we might implement works well. I do not think that it's a good idea that the engineer needs to work in an isolated place from any ethics. But I do think that the engineer cannot be the person who decides if a chatbot can use certain vocabulary or not, and thus creating a censor out of the engineer, because this is not what he is entitled to do, not only by training, but also by the situation in which he or she is placed. That would be the job of the regulatory bodies, or in some aspects, if we're not dealing with the legal aspects, but society. It's the role of society to decide what's ethical and what isn't. Once again, we're dealing with the ethical aspect, because we are all ethical beings, we think that we can all make decisions about that. And this is partly true, but I also need to remind you that this is a discipline and that it requires the same approach, serious approach, and the same professional assessments that we see in other professions.
Pregunta antes de cerrar.
Any other questions before we close? Lorena said that perhaps it is not something to worry about. Perhaps we are a little bit exaggerated. We sometimes have this feeling. We were in the artificial intelligence laboratory in Stanford, and it's one of the best in the world, and it is not that incredible. We were speaking with the creator of the Da Vinci robot, and he said, no, robots are not going to replace people. We just see an arm that is just doing an action. And it really, we need some time for them to be able to replace us in many simple tasks. But of course, whenever everything fits together, the technology is disruptive. So from a scientific point of view, what do you think, Mariano? Are we exaggerating or not? What I think is that what we were saying before, we should perhaps try to look at the budget, and look at the budget not just for the next year, but the budget for 30 years. It is very difficult to predict the future. We have small visions of what can come afterwards, but the fact that the arm, that robot cannot really tidy up a bed or something, and that doesn't matter. Society is making a lot of progress. Technology is evolving and developing very fast, and there are many areas in society that really do not make any progress or are very slow. Politicians are one of those areas where progress takes a long time. So we have to look for a way to predict or to try to think about what the future is going to look like in general terms, at a very high level. Disruption is very difficult. It's very difficult that disruption takes place suddenly. But I am quite optimistic, really, because genetically I think I am optimistic. It can be no other way. If you are an optimist, there's no other alternative. But we want to be careful as well, because I'm an Argentinian as well, yes. But we have to be very careful. I'm sorry, but I think that we have to leave it there. We just release you so that you can catch the train. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Una pregunta para Lorena.
Any questions for Lorena, or one last comment on her part, and we go on to the cocktail where we can discuss in a much more informal way. One last question from the audience? And a brief answer, please.
Can you hear me? At some point this afternoon, it has been said that the real challenge for the 21st century is not the digital revolution, but the digital transformation. And we think that we all agree that the underlying element is ethics. And regarding what the engineer just said and the answer that you have given him, I think there's something I'm missing here. You talk about responsibility and the ethical response from the society and from the lawmakers, but how do we solve that abstraction? Because society and the lawmakers are different. The regulatory bodies are abstract entities, and throughout time, it looks like the big issues are delegated in these abstractions. And my question is, have you been able to solve, or do you have any hints as to how to solve this issue? Thank you for your question. Ethics is like a river. It flows all the time. It changes with the historic context, the economic matters, the appearance of new entities, social entities, and new profiles in society, and we cannot solve it. Everything that is related to ethics is a complement to law that is the one in charge. Well, the main aspect of democracy, and this is what makes a difference with dictatorships, is that democracies do not request from the citizens to be moral beings, but for the society, for citizens to coexist. It's just in charge of setting the limits and finding the social conflicts and setting the rules to organize it. But then there are other aspects that we do not want the state to govern upon, like saying lies or being kind. In China, for instance, they have a different outview on this. This is done by society, and how this is realized changes depending on the historic context. The NGOs, obviously, and science are trying to take a position, a leadership position. They try to take a position in the sense of regulations, and if this is realized within society, it depends on the way they really appeal to society. I do not think that we can actually achieve a society where a conflict is completely solved. A society without a conflict is a stagnant society, and I think that we need to move away from that feeling that technology is pushing us to a greater movement and to a greater social change, because technology is not moving forward so fast. Everything that related to machine learning, only 1% of hospitals have any type of machine learning programs, just 1%, and this is causing more work, giving more work to X-ray experts and physicians than taking work from them. So everything related to technology and innovation is slower, is more slow in its adaptation than we might think. And this is good because this allows us to determine what we want to regulate and arrange among us.
Well, thank you very much. We don't have more time. Thank you very much to the speakers, to the attendees. This discussion and this debate will continue in Valencia and Barcelona in the next few months, because it is a topic that has to be discussed at length. We will have now a Spanish wine that we can share and continue the discussion. Thank you very much.